Turn to page 11 in the supplemental text in the white pages, and you'll see MA 81 Review, Systems of Linear Equations. And part 1 starts with this. We have Gannon trucks that you can rent for $54.95 per day, plus 29 cents per mile. Quinn's U-Haul, on the other hand, is $39.95 per day, but that one's only 49 cents per mile. We're going to let N represent the number of miles driven in one day, and C represent the total cost to rent the truck. Part A asks to write an equation to determine the total cost C of renting a truck for one day from Gannon Trucks. And that would be C equals 54.95 plus 0.29 times N. The cost of Quinn's U-Haul, this is part B, would be C equals $39.95 plus 0.49 times N. So those are our two equations. Now we're supposed to go to our calculator and type this into y1 and y2. Let's go ahead and do that. When we turn on our calculator, all we need to do is hit y equals, and that brings up the screen for entering in what we want to graph. And let's just go ahead and type in our two equations. The first one was 54.95 plus 0.29, and we'll just call this x. So what I clicked on was the xt theta button, and that's our variable button. And then our second equation will be the second equation that we came up with, the 39.95 plus 0.49 times our variable x. Even though it's n on the paper, this button is, we'll just leave it as x. It doesn't really matter what our independent variable is. Now, the next question says we need to use the table feature of our graphing calculator. So before I hit graph, I'm going to follow the directions on the page. It says to hit second, and then window, and that will give us table set. We want to start with table set equals 0, which it is, and you can just hit enter to switch to the next one. We want delta TBL to be 5. That tells us what the change is going to be for each increment. And now we're going to hit second and graph. What second graph does is it pulls up the table. So now we have a table that we can go ahead and fill in the table on our page that says number of miles driven. There's 10, 25, 40, 55, 65, all the way down to 100. And all we're going to do is scroll down. So if I look at when x is equal to 10, y1, which is Gannon Trucks, is $57.85. And Quinn's Trucks are $44.85. So that's what you're going to write in each of the columns. Going down to 25, that stands for 25 miles. And when we drive 25 miles, Gannon Trucks will be $62.20 and Quinn will be $52.20. Again, we'll scroll down to 40, $66.55 and $59.55. At 55 miles, it's $70.9 and $66.9. At 65 miles, it's $73.80 and $71.80. And it's interesting, at 75 miles, they're the exact same number. They're both $76.7. If we scroll down to 90, now Gannon Trucks are $81.05, whereas Quinn's U-Hauls are $84.05. So at 90 miles, they've switched. Now Quinn is more expensive. And if you go down to 100, you have $83.95 and $88.95. So those are the numbers you should be filling in your table on page 11 of the supplemental text. If you turn the page over, it's asking you to graph the two equations with your graphing calculator. But before we do that, you want to look at the x-min and x-max and y-min and y-max so we can set the window so we can see the whole graph. Well, if I look at the x-min, the x again is the far left-hand column, we looked at numbers from 0 to 100. If I look at my Y1 and Y2, it doesn't look like it gets any higher than 100 for the range that we're looking at. Now, it really only goes up to 88.95, but let's round up to 100. So let's click the window button, and my minimum X I want to be 0. It doesn't make any sense to drive -5 miles. In fact, we probably wouldn't even rent it if we only went 0 miles, but we'll go ahead and put 0 in first. For X max, let's go up to 100. And let's leave X SCL at 1. The Y minimum would be 0. It would cost us $0 if we didn't rent a truck. And let's go up to 100. Once you set the window, then you just go ahead and click on Graph. And now that's the first line for Gannon trucks, and that's the second line for Quinn's U-Hauls. On page 12 on part E, it says determine the point where the lines intersect. You do that by hitting second and then trace. And we want to scroll down to number 5, intersect. We want to know when these 2 points intersect. And you just need to get it somewhat close. In fact, I'm not going to even worry about it. And we're going to follow the directions on the page and just hit enter, enter, enter. And at the bottom of the screen it says at 75 miles, both of those lines, both the Gannon trucks and the Quinn U-Hauls, result in a Y of 76.7. So that's the point where the two lines intersect. That means at 75 miles, it doesn't matter which truck company we use, it will cost the exact same amount. Question G asks, what company should you use and why? Well, quite frankly, that answer depends on how many miles you're going to drive the truck. If you're not going to drive the truck very far, Gannon Trucks is probably not going to be the best choice because it's a lot of money per day, even though it's cheaper per mile. However, with the Quinn U-Haul, if you're not going very far, it makes sense to go that route. However, if you're going to be moving a long distance, you're better off with the Gannon trucks because even though it's more per day, the cost per mile is less.